I think part of the problem has been that there is a rush. They have not paid sufficient attention to the social issues to do with the compensation rates, issues to do with the environmental impacts of the project, all sorts of issues. What we are waiting to see is how the oil companies are able to respond to these specific issues that relate to project affected persons. Because we don't want even a single project affected person left behind. If they have an issue, it is incumbent on the oil companies, and they have committed in several documents that they are going to respond to these issues. What we clearly know is that the oil companies say that they have a grievance management mechanism, but we know that these grievance management mechanisms have not worked so far. They have not delivered justice to the communities. This is a grievance mechanism by the company, and that is being executed by the company itself. So you have you are like a judge in your own case. We need it made more independent. We want the industry to proceed, but not at the expense of the local people.
What issues mainly have you identified that communities have?
The PAPs claim that the compensation that has been earmarked for them is not sufficient. They are availing land for the project, but the project is not assisting them to be in the same position or a better position than they were. So the equitability of it, the PAPs claim that some people receive more compensation than others, and that begs the question, what criteria is being used to quantify the compensation amounts paid? Of course, there has also been a challenge of grievance management. Okay, when you have a grievance and it's a big project like the EACOP, you expect that the project should be able to provide a mechanism for the PAPs to be able to channel their grievances and get a solution within a defined period of time. Then the other issue is the delays. The delays, some people are saying that, okay, the money is little, but you pay us. Because we know that $1 of today is better than $1 of tomorrow. You're better off getting your dollar today because you can use it and be able to get a profit on the amount of money that you've invested. It's 3 years, and it's certain, if there is a loss, it's certainly on the local people, because they are saying that you valued our properties at this time, but a period has passed. Of course, I'm happy that the government and the oil companies have put a certain percentage as an increment, but still, that is not sufficient. The people should be paid as soon as possible. That is the spirit of the law, that when you value somebody, you should pay as soon as possible. Actually, the payment should even be done within a period of 6 months. Beyond that period of 6 months, then they should revalue, because the values of properties, both land and crops, they keep changing so rapidly.
So, Mr. Bashir, do you mean to say that revaluing is a legal mandate of the government if it did like this, or people are just looking for what it cannot be achieved in terms of the law?
No, it is. I think it's a settled question of the law that you should, when you value, you should pay this person as soon as possible. And the recommended time is a period of 6 months. Beyond 6 months, then questions will begin to be raised as to whether actually what you're paying is the value of the property you're taking, because 6 months is a long period of time, things can change. So it is a mandate for government and of course the financiers, who are the oil companies, to ensure that the people are not put at a disadvantage.
It's like Total, when they are talking about this issue, for instance, recently they had a community engagement in Kikuve. An official from Total called Fred Bazarausa declared to those people that Total is willing to add 15% per year on that package. People did not understand, is it on their wish or how is it to be? Because for them they thought they should be revalued.
I think those are the questions you get when you do things that are not well streamlined, because I've not seen any law, that talks about a payment of 15% per year. We all know the interest rates in this country. If, if for example, you get a loan, how much money you're going to pay on that loan in a given period. So the question will be, why 15%? Why not 17%, for example? Or why not 30%? Or why not 25, considering the interest rates? So those are the questions that you'll get. And the biggest challenge that we have with Total and the government is that they make these decisions unilaterally. If you're making such a decision, you should consult the affected community or sections of the affected community. As civil society, I can say that we have never been consulted about that. It's really news that is coming in of 15%. Of course, we have talked about that there must be a top-up. So it is a unilateral decision, and we think that it can be challenged, because we don't know where 15% is coming from. We don't know whether 15% is adequate.
Our dear viewer and listener on Kazi-Njema News Online Radio, we are saying this is our studio, and our program today we are focusing on the East African crude oil pipeline. My name is John Kibego in the studio, and our guest is Mr. Bashir Twesije, the chairperson for the Civil Society Coalition on Oil and Gas, as well as the executive director for the Civic Response on Environment and Development Grade. Another question that is along the way, in relation to this compensation, revaluation, topping up and the like, I spoke to Mr. Dennis Obo, who is the spokesperson for the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. And he told me that if somebody feels aggrieved, he's free to go to court and challenge and demand what he wants from the court. How do you see this influencing the game of compensation?
I don't think that is a fair comment from a government official, because we know the kinds of people we are talking about. We are talking about somebody in Kizeramfumbi sub-county, a village that is so remote, okay? They struggle to put food on the table, and you're asking them to go to court.
They're not satisfied with the rates.
To go to court and challenge government and challenge the oil company. The whole point about a grievance mechanism that is embedded in a project is really to overcome those challenges that the local people cannot afford to go to court. Court is a scare for them. They cannot afford it. It's also a very we know the challenges with court cases take so long to be resolved. So I think what the government and the oil companies need to do is to assist people in the communities, not challenge them to go to court.
We have a case of this man is called the Olishava Wile Bosco in Kakumiro there. He finds himself on the assessment form that he sits on a land whose owner is not known, and he's been there for 20 years knowing that he's the owner of that kibanja. But later the form that was brought to him was saying that he owns only crops, the landlord is somewhere. They looked around for the landlord, nowhere to be seen. He's perplexed, has no answer. How do you see this case?
For me, the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges I've faced with the oil companies and government is that in such situations, they pass the back onto the local people, well knowing the capacity of the local people. I think it should be the responsibility of the government, of the oil companies, to trace for who this purported landowner is, and also investigate how did this landowner get the title. But by passing over this responsibility to a PAP to go and look for a spouse, I've also heard about those cases where they say we will not pay you until you bring the spouse. But this couple divorced so many years ago, like 2 years ago. You did the valuation 3 years ago. They divorced and you don't know where the other couple is. It's the same case. So for the government and the oil companies to pass this responsibility onto this vulnerable person is unfortunate, because it's not taking into consideration the vulnerability of the communities that they are engaging with.
Okay, thank you so much. But as we move to the end, could you give a general comment, because you have shown that it is difficult to access justice in courts of law and the like, which means the entire human rights situation is suppressed there. Could you give a general comment about access to justice in Uganda?
I think generally, of course, we have so many challenges in access to justice, but the companies, the oil companies, must take a bigger responsibility, because you've come to a country where access to justice is a challenge. Cases take, and on average, a land case will take 5 to 8 years to be resolved. The courts are not accessible. The local people are not aware. They are ignorant. Courts are scarce. So the oil companies must take up the responsibilities that they have incurred by signing on to certain standards, including the IFC standards, and must be able to deliver this justice to the local people even without going to court. So they must be fair, they must be equitable in their dealings with the local people, and must ensure that the local people are satisfied by the actions of the industry.
You have described the courts as scarce and inaccessible and the like. Could you give some more light about that?
The distance a person has to travel to go to the nearest court is so huge. For a person to come from Kiziramfombe, because many of the cases, like land cases, the pecuniary jurisdiction, it involves a lot of money, so the case can only be heard by the High Court. So for a person to move and go to Masindi to file their case, and it's a long distance. Then you go to court, they ask you to come back after a certain time, and it takes so many years. You going to court and nothing is happening. It really discourages. It really discourages people. But also courts are seen as forums for people who have gone to school, the people who understand the law, and the community feel intimidated. This is not a place for them. After all, they cannot afford a lawyer. So that's what I mean.
Kazi-Njema, online, live from Hoima City.